about the movie, but when I was standing out in the lobby, I could hear some clapping. So I have a feeling we're in good shape tonight. I'm Perry Nemiroff. I work with Collider, and I have had the pleasure of moderating a few Q&As with this guy right here. We have writer, director, producer of Knives Out, Rian Johnson. That was incredible.
Thank you.
I've gone to so many screenings lately. That was one of the most heartwarming, enthusiastic cheers I've ever heard.
You guys are wonderful. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for coming. And Perry, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you guys. My mother, ladies and gentlemen.
So no better place to start than at the very beginning. You decide you want to write a whodunit story. What is step one for you? Is it research? Is it structure? Is it putting pen to paper for certain scenes? What's the first step of your process?
Well, I grew up loving Agatha Christie's books, so the research part of it I've kind of been doing since I was a little kid. I just love whodunits, and I'm a whodunit fanatic. I still go back and revisit her books, and I'm still discovering new stuff. I just got into John Dixon Carr recently. I don't know if anyone knows John Dixon Carr. There's so many great authors of that golden age of detective fiction. Anyway, so for me, the first step was actually kind of thinking in a really zoomed back way about turning a whodunit into a movie. And the first idea I had about 10 years ago was not even a plot or a character idea, it was a structural one. It was, could you take a whodunit and then turn it into a Hitchcock thriller and then turn it back into a whodunit at the end? And it started kind of as simple as that. And that way you avoid kind of that middle part of a whodunit, which especially on the screen can present problems where you're just kind of gathering clues and waiting for the detective to reveal the solution to you that you never could have guessed anyway. So, but then I still get to have my cake and eat it too, because you get to have your donut and eat it too, because at the end, sorry, I apologize. I just lost all the goodwill in the crowd. Because at the end, you still get the detective's denouement, which is one of my favorite types of scenes in fiction, so I knew I wanted that.
I was going to save this for later, but you brought up the donut. Can you tell me a little bit about coming up with the donut speech? Why a donut? Are you a big donut fan? Why not a bagel?
Oh, who's not? Oh, bagel donut. Come on, you put one in front of me. It was in there initially. I almost cut it in the script because I thought, oh, this is kind of silly. And Daniel, kind of when we were going through it, raised his eyebrow and said, well, I quite like that. And so I kept it in, and he really sold it. But and we also, I don't know if this led to us having donuts on set every Friday, but it was worth it just for that.
It's a good thing all around for everyone then. When do you figure out the answer to your whodunit? Do you know early on in the process that it's always going to be Ransom, or did you toy around with any other characters being the culprit here?
Yeah, no. The way that I went about writing it wasn't like a game of Clue where I could pick different people who did it at the end. The way I approached it, and I feel like this is kind of key to writing a whodunit, and I think it's kind of the case. And if you look at all of Christie's books, Agatha Christie's books. You have to think of it first and foremost not as a puzzle with a very surprising solution at the end, but first and foremost as a dramatic story. And so it's every one of these things is built first and foremost as a story that's going to be satisfying at the end. And so really, the satisfying conclusion is not, oh, he did it, I never would have guessed that, or I did guess that, or however it works. The real satisfying thing is Marta sitting up on the balcony at the end, and the family down at the bottom. And so in that way, and Ransom having done it is a very important part of giving the audience that feeling at the end of having it feel satisfying, basically.
Speaking of that feeling, we're actually seeing a lot of movies right now that tackle economic inequality, and I feel like a lot of them might have a little bit of not negative, but a darker ending to it, where your movie is treating that topic in a very uplifting manner at the end. So why do you think we're getting so many of those movies right now, and why did you want that tone for your film?
Yeah, it seems like there's so many. I mean, there's so many great movies this year, but yeah, there's a lot of movies that are kind of deal. Yeah, there's something in the air. But it was really important to me from the start, though, that the movie had a good heart, for lack of a better way of putting it, and that I wanted for all the dark, the kind of, it's got a light tone, but we do kind of deal with some kind of like darker stuff in it, and I wanted to find a way through it, especially now. I wanted to find a way through it so that at the end there was something we could put our chips down on and say, you know what, yeah, but it's a lot of rough stuff, but we have to believe in the essential thing that if you make choices for the right reasons, and if you essentially are good to the person standing right in front of you, then that can make a difference, So it sounds really cheesy when you just say it like that, but I really wanted that feeling at the end of it, especially because it was going to be a murder mystery that dealt with all this stuff.
I appreciate that quite a bit. I've also been talking to a lot of writers lately who tell me that the story kind of comes out through the process, the story winds up finding itself. Do you find that happening in your scripts, and do you find it happening most in the script process, on set, or in the edit?
Yeah, I mean, it happens all through it. For me, I'm a really structural writer, so when I describe how I write, it can sound a little clinical, I think, and it is more organic than that. You do feel your way through it, and the whole thing. And anyone here who's a writer, like at some point, it becomes something that you're writing as opposed to leading by the nose. It becomes something where it has its own shape, its own momentum. But that having been said, I do a lot of planning before I write, and I extensively outline, and especially with something like this, I need to have a roadmap in my head for the whole thing before it's not like I sit down and start writing page one and let the thing organically lead me. I need to have a satellite map, basically.
Does that let you be fluid with the work on set at all? Was there any particular scene maybe that you knew you couldn't really find in the scripting process? You had to do it with your actors on the day?
There's stuff that changes on set, and you have to be open to that. Just if you put it on its feet and you realize for this movie, it was largely stuff that had exposition in it. It was largely stuff where information had to be conveyed. And Chris Evans, for example, he has an incredible bullshit detector when it comes to exposition that is just like movie dialogue. Like, why am I saying this right now? And if the answer is, well, because I need the audience to know that right now, that's a bad answer, and you'll both know it. And you got to figure out another way to get the information across. I think because maybe Chris has done all the Marvel movies that have so much exposition around it. He's got a really finely tuned sensor to that, which is incredibly useful. And that's the sort of thing where on set you have to, if an actor brings that to you, you're dumb not to listen to that.
Which of those characters was the easiest and the most challenging for you to write?
I mean, Marta was probably not the most challenging in terms of, oh boy, it's really a grind or something, but she just, she has the most complex arc through it, and in terms of the audience's relationship to her, she was the one that the most work went into, just because she's the center of the movie and she's what the whole thing kind of hinges on. I really loved writing. Blanc. He was really fun with that accent. Yeah, with that accent, and I'm like, whoa, yeah. And so that's why he has lots of words in the movie. And Daniel is, I can't say enough good stuff about Daniel Craig. We had a lot of fun doing the movie. You can probably tell how much fun we were having. And he also, the last 30 minutes of the movie in the library, he approached that, he came in for those final 2 weeks of shooting with that entire last 30 minutes stone cold down, as if it were a stage play. And I started adjusting my shooting stuff. I had all my little clever shots and bullshit all worked out. And I ended up throwing that away after day one and just saying, okay, I'm gonna adjust my shots and just give him runway. And I learned that the longer I could let him go without calling cut, the longer I could carry him in shots, the better he was. It was really cool to see.
With so many accomplished actors in your ensemble, I'm curious, did you have a similar approach to anyone else in terms of you needing to adjust your directing style to how they like to work on set?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the job of the director, is to adjust to every actor and give them what they need to do their best work. I think, and that way, you are very much. I don't know. I think that's kind of your most important job on set. Actually, is to make sure is to kind of figure out what each person needs, and every person is so different, and then as best you can give them that so they're feeling comfortable and can do their best work.
This is kind of a big question that I don't think there's one answer to, but running with that idea, what about just your department heads, and not just being a creative director on set, but also, you know, being a leader, like the leader of this team here? Are there any specific things you like to do on your set to make you feel like the most effective leader to create this kind of, you know, fruitful working relationship?
Day one, you gotta pick a crew member and shiv them. You gotta take one person down, and then everyone, no. I think that I think that if you, to me, it's less about coming on set and kind of like establishing yourself as a leader. It's more just doing the prep work, doing the prep, doing the everything you need to do. So when you step on set, you know what story you're going to tell, and you have an idea of what you want on the screen and how to get it there. And I think my experience is you don't have to do any kind of like thing to set yourself as a leader. A crew will absolutely get behind that if they sense it on set. So I think just doing your work as a storyteller and knowing what you're going for when you show up, that's the number one thing you can do. And to get the best work out of your crew also, I think that's how everyone works best.
You have such an incredible crew here. I don't even know where to start, but I guess maybe the shots. Do you script your shots at all, or is that something you collaborate with Steve on after you've already finished your screenplay?
I do. I storyboard, and I storyboard really badly. I do like line drawings. I did one of these yesterday with director Bong, who did Parasite. I got to like do what Perry's doing now and ask him questions. Oh, you should have been here yesterday. It was so much better. So much better. But yeah, so and he gave me like a book that he's published of his storyboards for Parasite, and it's gorgeous. It's like beautiful. It's like watching a whole other movie. And then after he sent it to me, when I got home, I emailed him back like a picture of my storyboard, and it was like it's kind of it's supposed to be a woman sitting in a chair, but it looks like a cow that's like been propped up or something, and just like the arms are just little sticks, and like it was so sad. It was like, you win.
Whatever works for you.
Yeah, but I do need like a plan when I show up on set for a scene, and we may end up throwing it out, and you have to be collaborative, and you have to leave yourself open. It's not like you have to stick to that, do or die. But for me, if I can't show up, if I show up on set and don't have at least some idea of how I'm going to cover a scene, that seems scary. Yeah.
What about your plan as far as costume and production design goes? Because I've watched this movie more times than I can count, and there are so many details in that house. So much of what they're wearing speaks to who they are as a person and how they carry themselves. So do you list that out for your department heads before jumping in, or do you kind of collaborate, and what kind of ideas did they bring to the table?
Oh no, it's totally collaborative. I mean, I have lots of, like Jenny Egan, who was our amazing costume designer, and Jenny is just absolutely incredible. And she did, I mean, you know, she had a really tough task in terms of like making each of the characters seem as distinct as the characters on the clue board, you know, and yet having them feel modern and not, you know, costumey, having them feel like things that people would actually wear, and putting Chris Evans in those sweaters. So she did really well. And then David Crank was our production designer, who's brilliant. David is collaborated with Jack Fisk on PTA's movies and Terrence Malick's films. David's just amazing. The real VIP in my mind is, or MVP, I guess, he's also a VIP, is David Schlesinger, who was our set decorator. Mm-hmm. And Schlesinger is the one, because that was a real house that we found, and Schlesinger is the one who found all of the stuff to dress it with. Because none of that was there. The house was not owned by psychopaths, so it was not filled with, it wasn't filled with knife structures and everything, you know, sculptures and headless dolls and stuff. So David was the one who found automaton collectors and convinced them to lend us their robots, and who found all of this artwork. And he just, I gave him the reference of the 1970s version of Sleuth, which is one of my favorite films, and he kind of went to town with it.
Just a suggestion. I feel like, because you brought up Clue, I feel like you should make a Knives Out board game. I would play it.
Good. I feel like we can beat Clue with, because have you played Clue as an adult? It's a pretty boring game. It's not a lot to it. It's a lot of walking. It's like Lord of the Rings. You're just kind of walking around the town. And
We got a whole bunch of sales in this room too.
all right, okay, all right. I'm gonna get on it. All right.
So another thing that I feel like we don't talk about nearly enough is casting directors, and you've worked with Mary. What is this, your fourth time together?
Yeah, Mary Vernew.
Yeah. So what is it that you look for in a casting director, and what is it about her that makes you two ideal collaborators?
Well, Mary's, she's, a relationship with a casting director, it is something that doesn't get talked about enough. Thank you for asking that. Mary is, she's a true collaborator. We work together now for several films. With this movie specifically, I mean, it's fun. The rest of the cast is really fun because it's kind of coming up with lists of names, and it's that all-star cast thing. It was kind of like who would be the most fun to see in these parts. But the place where Mary and the relationship with Mary really paid off was in casting Ana de Armas. Because that was one part where, Ana, incredible. And Mary was the one. I'd seen Blade Runner, I knew she was good. I wasn't really aware of Ana, and Mary was the one who, with real passion, said, you have to look at this actor, and really made the case for her. And of course, once Ana came in and read, and I worked with her a little bit, I realized, what we had on our hands and just how special she was. But it was Mary who, and Mary had seen Ana. The real reason Mary believed in Ana is she had seen her come, not even her work in other movies, she had seen her come in to read for other things, and seen her in the room and saw what she gave in the auditions. Even for parts that she didn't get. And so Mary just knew that there was something really special about Ana, and God, she was right, yeah.
Without a doubt. I also wanted to ask you about working with Noah again, because you guys work together on just about everything, and it's a really interesting character here because he's not necessarily someone who figures anything out or moves the plot along, but instead, I find that his great value here is just, this infectious enthusiasm, having a character that's just excited as we are to see everything unfold. So why did you choose to craft a character like that for this?
Yeah, so that's Noah Segan, who's one of my best friends, and he's been in literally every movie I've ever made. We are best friends. We see each other every day. It would be really awkward, actually, if I didn't put him in something I was making. But I put him in just because he's like that character. He plays the Trooper Wagner, and he's a little bit like that in that he's got this kind of infectious enthusiasm, and so he also became like everybody loved him so much on set. He became like the binding element, like everyone would hang out together because everyone wanted to hang out with Noah, and so. But so I feel like I finally captured his spirit animal, which is a golden retriever.
We're going to start to work in some audience questions. I have a feeling there might be a few, so if you just want to raise your hand, I'll start to pick. All right in the middle there. Going with you first.
I love the subject of family inheritance. It's so satisfying, and I just love how you just socked it to all those people. What made you choose that subject?
So in case anyone can't hear, the question is about choosing the subject of family inheritance in the movie.
Yeah, it's, one of the things that I really love about Agatha Christie's books and about, did I just activate a Siri search?
That was my watch.
Oh my God. Hey,
I don't
Siri.
think I've ever had the sound on my watch since I bought it.
You know what? In terms of things that could have blurred out, that was not
the
that bad.
The excitement in the audience just like conjured it to work. That was freaky.
One of the things I love about Whodunits is they are kind of really innately really good at talking about class, I guess, for lack of a better word. If you think about the structure of a whodunit, it's you have a little microcosm of society. You have a group of suspects in a contained space. They all have some kind of relationship to each other, and so there's a power structure within that. And the person at the top of that power pyramid is going to get bumped off. And the inheritance is like part of that, that plays into that. But the very nature of it lends to showing you this cross-section of a picture of society without having to stop and give a lecture about class or about whatever. It's just part of the mechanics of this really fun ride. And that, for me, is kind of what you're always looking for with genre, I think, is to do something where the shape of the ride itself gives the talks about the theme or gives the message of whatever you're trying to give, as opposed to stopping the ride to wag a finger at the audience or something.
Speaking of the inheritance part, how did you get Frank Oz in this movie? Because I don't think we've seen him in the flesh in a movie in quite some time. So what was that conversation like?
So I made a Star Wars movie that had Frank in it. That was, and that's where we became friends. As we, so Frank did, he performs Yoda, and he had one scene in The Last Jedi. But if you would like directing that scene, it gave me a whole appreciation for all of the Muppets movies, because every single shot is like its own production. You have to know, he has to know exactly how the puppet's moving, he has to rehearse it. And so even though it was that one scene, he came out to Pinewood and we spent a lot of time together, because it was 6 weeks of rehearsal and prep to do that one scene. So we got really close. He's also just the loveliest guy in the world. He's incredible director, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, Little Shop of Horrors. He's just like an amazing director that I respect. And I asked him, I also grew up watching him pop up in little roles in like the Blues Brothers and stuff. And so I just said, Frank, why don't you come down and do this thing? And it wasn't until he got on set that I realized how big a favor he was actually doing, because I realized, he really doesn't enjoy doing this. I think acting without without a puppet, I think is not his jam. But he was so sweet to do it, and I'm so thankful we have Frank Oz in the movie.
And he's very good at it.
Yeah, he's great. He's great.
All right, let's get another one. How about you up there? Yep.
So in mysteries, there's often a character that has like a strange affectation or character trait, and I'm curious about her vomiting whenever she lies. It's beyond just being a character trait. It's actually impacting how the story unfolds.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, at what point in the process did you actually make the decision to have that be your thing?
This question is about Marta's vomiting and how you came up with that.
Yeah, I mean, it started with and you kind of keyed into it, started just with a story decision, which was, talking about the Hitchcock thriller that's in the middle of it, and that's really Marta's place in the thing. So in the Hitchcock tradition, she is the person we care about who is in this impossible situation, and we're leaning forward, seeing if how she can possibly get out of it. And the only tool she has to get out of it is lying. And so it's the Vince Gilligan school of writing, where you take the characters you care about the most and make life as hard on them as possible. So I thought, okay, let's take away her ability to lie, which also kind of backs up this kind of notion I kept trying to get through of like her inherent goodness. And so I thought, well, okay, we give her a tell, like a House of Games style tell, like maybe you twist her ring or touches her nose twice, or she could vomit. And once I realized with the vomiting how I could use that at the end, because that moment at the end where she pukes in Chris's face, besides being really fun to film, it actually had like a really important purpose, which is, if you think about it, we have at that point just watched our protagonist sit passively and listen for 20 minutes while a secondary character explains the whole thing to her. And I needed a moment at the end where she actively did something to beat Ransom and win. And so that, in addition, having set that thing up, that gave me the ability to have her do this kind of, not just the puking, but the knowing she had to lie and hold it together and all of that, which I felt was really necessary for that.
Speaking of other little character details, I'm always fascinated by just like history and why something is what it is. Did you come up with a reason why Michael Shannon has a cane in the movie?
Yes, we only cut there are only 2 deleted scenes in the whole thing, and we'll put them, when we do the home video release, we'll include them, not in the movie, but like as extras, and one of them explains why he has the thing, yeah.
All right, let's see if we can get one more in. I got you on the aisle right there.
At an ending of many twists and turns, were there any twists and turns that you painfully had to cut?
Were there any twists and turns in the movie that you had to cut?
There was, like the scene I mentioned with Michael Shannon, there was one other scene that had Toni Collette's character, Joni, and Daniel Craig. And it wasn't like a big twist, but it was just both those scenes gave kind of extra motivation for both of those characters to need the will. And it was something where they were both really, really fun. I'm excited for you guys to see them if you get it. They were really, really fun scenes, one of them, the one with Joni, we had set up that Blanc has like a rash on his neck. And when he sits down with her, he says that he bought one of her beauty products. I bought the snail jelly moisturizer, sensitive skin, and he developed a rash from it. And that's how he started researching online and found out that all the people who got it were getting rashes, and her company was totally broke. And so it's fun stuff like that. And Tony is like amazing in that scene, and Daniel's great, and so it always guts you a little bit to cut it. But you know, I mean, you have to. It was in the back half of the movie. It was a pacing thing. We had to get it going, and so you know, it had to go.
All right, I'm getting the wrap-up sign. One more. You look so eager right there. I have to pick you.
Just really quick, is that, with her beauty line, anything like a play off of Goop?
Goop. I don't know. Is Gwen here? I don't want to get in trouble. Yeah.
Like that's what came to mind.
Yeah.
Like her personality and the way she would
Flam. Flam, Goop. I can see it. Yeah. Yeah.
That was brilliant, and I love all the little like Easter eggs, like the cup at the beginning and the tying it in at the end. And
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Look at that. You guys wrapped up tonight for me. Big round of applause for Ryan. Thank you guys so much.
Guys, thank you so much.